is News Conference Extra with Conan Nolan.
Good morning and welcome to News Conference Extra, a special segment of Today in LA Weekend. With us, Chuck Todd, who hosts Meet the Press, which airs every Sunday morning here at 8 o'clock. So, Chuck, we had big protest demonstrations in Huntington Beach against the closure of the beaches there. People want to get back to work. They're not happy with the stay-at-home restrictions still in this state. There's history to this. You look at 1918 in the pandemic, San Francisco had huge demonstrations. And so, indeed, we are at a point where the divisions in the country are becoming more pronounced over the COVID-19 pandemic.
And I don't know if this will reassure your viewers, Conan, but you know, a lot of times we think our polarization now that there's never been anything like this in history. The fact is, sadly, pandemics bring out the selfish in countries, in people, because if you think about it, a pandemic, you know, the first thing you're worried about is your own life. First thing you're worried about is your own livelihood. And that's what we're seeing here. And so a little bit of this is, hey, what about me? And I think everybody, this is what happened in 1918 in many communities. So in some ways, looks like it's a bit human nature, if you will, where this life versus livelihood debate, I think, frankly, you can't sit here and say one side is definitely right and one side's definitely wrong. You get the balance that I think politicians are trying to figure out how to strike. The problem is, what some of these politicians will tell you is that we just don't have enough data to know if we're doing this right when it comes to easing these restrictions. I think there's a lot of politicians get that there's only so much patience the public's going to have on this. But our continued lack of insight on this virus, I do think hamstrings these politicians and these decisions that they have to make.
But if history is the guide, looking back 102 years ago, we will be, this virus will be with us forever. And that is to say that there was another outbreak in 1918, and then a third outbreak, which wasn't as severe, and then it ended up just being background flu, something that people had generally, but no spikes. And so you look at the Drudge Report, for example, saying it could last 3 years or 2 years. That may be the future.
Conan, it's more like, it will be an amazing achievement if it doesn't. I mean, I think that's the, I do worry that us in the press here, we are repeating the 12 to 18 month timeline on a vaccine as if it's going to happen on the 12 to 18 month timeline. That's an amazing timeline if it happens. It could be 3 or 4 years, which in and of itself would be an amazing timeline. If that happened. I think we do need to temper expectations here. I think that is, as we're conveying this information, we need to remind people that 12 to 18 months for a vaccine would be amazing. I am surprised there isn't more of an effort being made on a therapeutic, because frankly, that's more achievable in a shorter period of time, finding something that saves lives here for this. As sort of a stopgap until we get, and that's probably the most likely result over the next couple of years, is that we finally come to a set of treatments that allow people to survive this. And if that is a known quantity, that will give confidence to people, I think, to engage in the economy more.
Let's talk about Joe Biden. The Tara Reade situation has gotten pretty nasty for him, it seems. Now, keep in mind that this is a woman who, by all objective information that we have, has more behind her accusations than Christine Blasey Ford had against Judge Brett Kavanaugh. In that we have people coming out that said, yes, she told me about this, plus she worked for him. It wasn't a high school event. It was while he was a U.S. Senator. How difficult do you see this playing out for the former vice president?
I think with a lot of these stories, Conan, and history shows this, it all depends on if this is all the information. If you're telling me, is this all the information we have, or is more going to come out, right? Is there going to be another accuser? A lot of times these things take off when there's a second accuser with a very similar thing, or more information comes out here. I do think the timing of this probably minimizes the political impact for Biden. I think had this been 3 months earlier, with this hit sort of this sort of peak moment here, it could have been at a time when he was much more vulnerable in the primary. And then now that he's in the general, he is running against Donald Trump, who has his own sort of Access Hollywood situation. And that's the question here. It's possible the Tara Reade thing goes sort of into the Access Hollywood container, right, where it's a subjective thing that the voters take into account. But he put out a new marker in those comments on Friday when he said, called on the Secretary of Senate, go find that, said if she did file a complaint, it should be in the National Archives, and that it should be findable. I think if that complaint is found, I think that ramps this up, and that becomes a lot more problematic to the Vice President than it is now. I think without any new tangible pieces of evidence, and that complaint would be a tangible piece of evidence, it may end up in this sort of ether a la Access Hollywood.
Who's on the program?
Well, we're still we're going to be doing a deep dive into the vaccine issue with the folks at Oxford University. So we're going to begin from there, but also get it's basically the science versus the economists on when to open. That's basically our lead.
More troubled days ahead. Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, thank you very much for joining us, and stay safe.
Thanks, Conan.
In NBC4's news conference following Meet the Press, we'll be talking to Superintendent Austin Butner of the Los Angeles Unified School District on whether or not we will be able to open in July or what time in August. We'll also be taking a look at the impact on the debate over density in the urban centers of California as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, and comments from the leader of the Republican Party in the California State Assembly, why she thinks the governor overreached when he closed the beaches of Orange County. That's news conference at 9 o'clock following Meet the Press. We'll see you then.